Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar of this series. I'm so excited that you decided to join us today on this August 16th. Today is our 17th webinar, although it feels like we've done 100 of these already. We love these webinars, and I hope that you do too. We get quite good feedback afterwards from the people that join. So please do send us your feedback. If there are certain topics that you'd like to hear, we'd love to hear from you. So as everybody is trickling in, we have still people joining. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to join and settle in. So while everybody is coming in, do leave maybe the city and country where you're joining us from, and also what is your title at work. That way we can understand the makeup of the group a little bit better. I can start. At the moment, I am in Sintra, Portugal, which is about 30 minutes away from Lisbon. I am here with my family, my 2 kids and my husband. We have been pretty nomadic for the last 4 years since the kids were born. And we came to Sintra because a company that's actually on this panel today, Boundless Life, makes this traveling around the world with kids super easy. We have this great location here in the city center. It's pretty historic. Sintra is about 12,000 years old, so it's really beautiful. And they have an education center for the kids. So basically that a question of like, what do I do with my kids if I work from anywhere? It's kind of solved for you. So I'm here in Sintra. There's locations in Portugal, Italy, and Greece. So you can kind of like switch around and travel the world with community and also have your kids taken care of. So pretty cool stuff. You'll hear more from the founder here today, which they're building a fully remote team. And okay, so it is 5:02. In the interest of time, I will probably get started, even though more people are joining. I'll give a couple more minutes. Okay, let's see where people are joining us from. All right, so we have Clarissa from Pretoria. Hello, the UK. We have Christy from Washington State, and she's been working remotely for almost 10 years, but remote working is new to my current company. I feel you. That's awesome. We're going to talk about that today. We have a payroll manager from New Mexico. Tiffany, welcome. Becky from Chichester, United Kingdom. I never heard that. That's very cool, even though I've lived in London for a bit. Very cool. South Africa. Yeah, please put down where you're coming from. We have a buyer and someone from Spain. People ops coordinator from London. Oh, cool. Hey, Charlotte from Sweden. Very cool. Yeah, feel free to put in the chat where you guys are joining from. It's always fun to see where everyone is at. Again, welcome and hello to those who just joined. I'm joining in from Sintra, Portugal. Super excited to talk about the 3 incredible lessons from being a 100% remote team. So without further ado, I have Charles here in the background that you can't see, who's helping me out with a few things during this webinar. The first will be with the slides. So Charles, if we can go to the slide. Okay, perfect. So why am I here and why should you listen to me? My name is Lona. I am not only the head of revenue for SafetyWing, but I'm also a Y Combinator founder, an advisor to many different startups, as well as the EU for Innovation. I love remote work. I had discovered it accidentally many, many years ago, but have been doing it fully the last couple of years with a fully remote team, which is SafetyWing. We are about 170 people right now and growing very fast. I've built teams remote from 0 to 1 and 0 to a few million in revenue. So I do understand very well what works best to build a thriving team in a remote setting. And what is SafetyWing? Maybe the next slide. So SafetyWing, we offer global benefits for remote and distributed teams. What does that mean? That means health insurance for your team, whether they're located in Pretoria, South Africa, or whether they're located in Estonia, You can cover everyone under one plan, one dashboard, one price, to make it logistically super easy for you to offer benefits. This has been really hard for people to do when they hire team members from different countries. They have to figure out health insurance one by one, but you don't have to do that anymore. You can just have one plan with SafetyWing and it covers everyone. Not only do we have health insurance, but we have remote retirement, which is like a 401k equivalent in the US, remote therapy, income protection, parental leave, etc. So we're building this like global benefits package, which is fully remote and distributed. We are the first ones to do this. Okay, great. So let's get into the agenda. Today we're going to start the webinar with a poll, and then we're going to go into the panel discussion, and then the Q&A. I just want to stress that the Q&A is super important. So yeah, the poll here. Is your organization borderless? Please choose one of these 5. But while you're doing that, what I was going to say is that the Q&A, there's a lot of value in there, so we leave plenty of room at the end for questions. So make sure that you write your questions early. That way you can be at the top and we're able to answer them within the time allotted for this webinar. So feel free to vote. This is always super fun and interesting to see the split between. And we've got quite a high number for no, we do not have plans to become borderless. That's 25%. No, but we do want to become borderless. Okay, great. Okay, so the majority of you, as you can see here, are in 2 or more countries, and then about 10% do want to become borderless, and the rest, 24%, do not have plans to become borderless, and that's great too. Great, so let's go back to the, oh, cool. So now we can invite the panelists to the stage. If you guys can turn on your cameras, and maybe in the order that you are listed here today, you can give us a brief background on who you are, your company, and why you being here and talking about this topic.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. My name is Phil Ram. I'm the founder and principal human capital consultant here at Elite HR. And what we do is we work with organizations that fit in those first 2 questions. Know they have no plans and know they aren't borderless but want to be, get over the hump of becoming borderless and how to put in the strategies and mindsets that are required to be borderless.
I love that. And John Lee?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Lona. Great to catch up again. So yeah, CEO or co-founder of the Work From Anywhere team, and basically what we focus on is we do technology and services to help companies navigate the tax challenges of work from anywhere and help you figure out, for example, how to hire a developer in a different country via legal entity or employer of record or consultant, whatever way it would be.
Very cool. Thank you, John. Mara?
Hi, Lona. Thanks for having me here. I'm Mauro Rapace. I'm the founder and CEO of Boundless Life. We empower families to become digital nomads with 2 things. An education system that follow your kids anywhere they go, so they can have a great education regardless of where you live, and a community of like-minded parents that you can have instantaneously as you move to a new city.
Awesome. Thank you, Mara, Phil, and John. Very nice to have you here. I'm really excited for our conversation today because it will touch on a few different points that people are very interested about, hearing about them and how they can kind of like run the best teams for themselves. So maybe we can start with the base question because it seems to a lot of people that there's a lot of obstacles of starting a fully remote team. Maybe we can name some of those and potentially how we could solve for them, like some advice that you would give to overcome those obstacles. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first again. I think one of some of the obstacles is just exactly what some of my panelist friends here, John and Mauro, solve is how do I educate my kids? How do you educate your employees' kids? Can they provide a community and a full life? And then how do I do the nuts and bolts kind of activities like pay taxes and get health insurance and all those other things. And so just part of it is educating them that there are these services available, and that can make it really easy to tap into some of the great global talent that's available.
Yeah, I think maybe tying into that as well, one of the big things, if you look at it, split into two different aspects, whether it's domestic or international, is a very, very different approach to the solutions and challenges that you're going to face. But, you know, in many ways you split into soft and hard aspects. The softer aspects will be more how you manage a team, for example, you know, emotional intelligence, cross-cultural leadership, all the different aspects required in async versus sync, all those skills to get that side right. But then some of the harder aspects, you know, managing a laptop remotely, for example, it's the support you need there, or dealing with the taxes, or finding a school, you know, for your kids, for example. So it'd be interesting to see the panelists' take on how they see the different aspects of it. But maybe the two wants to jump out.
Yeah,
that's great. From my perspective, being twice a founder of two companies that had one office, one location, and we brought our employees to the same place and created an amazing environment, amazing culture, is a mindset change that you need to have, where you'll be able to collaborate the same way, but being in different time zones and different locations requires a manager to actually change that mindset. But also in terms of perks, like before you're offering like happy hours and, you know, stock fridge and things like that. But now, how can you balance that to a remote team that is everywhere in the world?
Yeah, not totally, 100%. And I think it's important to call out that mindset change that is required for big companies to give this freedom and flexibility to their employees and contractors, because I know that many people did taste remote work, but I have a hunch that most people have not tasted work from anywhere, which is a lot different. And that's what all of us here have done with our teams, and we can speak to that because it is the biggest benefit you can give your team, is that, you know, freedom and flexibility to work from anywhere. And that's a big difference between remote work from home and remote work from anywhere. And I just want to make that clear, because many people will just say, oh yeah, you're allowed to work remotely. Oh, and by the way, you can only be in London. And that really closes off all of the opportunities for that person to live their best life. And I know that John has done this with his family in many different countries, myself as well. And it's just such a big difference to like wake up every day with a purpose, and also have this like different location that you feel inspired to be there every day, versus being made to go to a concrete box where you don't really feel much affinity for. And actually that 9 to 5 type work is 100 years old, literally. And we need to innovate beyond that. And that's why I think it's so important to have conversations like this, because we can bring to the table those tools, technologies, and mindsets that are required to build thriving teams, so they can also live these thriving lives on their own. So, okay, let's continue on. What are some of the biggest pros and cons of a 100% remote team? Maybe it could be like some cost savings on one side, where you don't have to have offices. What have you guys seen building your team? Some of the pros, and then maybe some of the cons.
I can jump in first on this one. The biggest pros was to actually being able to attract a much more diverse type of talents, because before we were really narrow to the city where our office was located. And now for Boundless, for example, we have over 50 employees in 14 different countries. And that is really amazing, because you're bringing really people that are coming for your vision and mission, and not because your office is 20 minutes from their home. So that is really life-changing in terms of motivation. And I think the challenge is the time zone from our perspective. Is switching from like having meetings and, you know, everyone in the same room and trying to create something, and having people in different time zones collaborating on Slack or by, you know, another type of tool, and then maybe getting together once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year to really build that relationship.
And I would echo what Mauro says, that the cost savings. I'm US based. Cost savings going out of the US is significant. when you hire globally, and if you can hedge your FX risk and offer comparable benefits in terms of health and wealth and safety, then that is a tremendous savings, an opportunity to tap into a greater diversity of thought. But it is significantly harder to build those long-term relationships. It's much more work on leadership to be the ones that ask those types of questions that we're just not trained to ask. And you don't see somebody every day, and it has to be more than how are you doing. You have to really take an effort to really get to know people in smaller one-on-one, one-on-two type of situations.
John, did you have something to add? Or?
Yeah, no, I think the guys have covered it very well. I mean, at the end of the day, the variabilization of one of the biggest fixed cost bases of big companies is obviously a major benefit. I think one of the potential downsides that some companies, speaking to, are struggling with is the younger people joining the company having access to the mentorship. I think that face-to-face mentorship can be very, very powerful for some people. So how you kind of get your teams or the younger people coming in to kind of upskill themselves. And of course, there are ways and tools you can do to do that remotely, but making sure they don't fall into a void. Obviously, the most successful remote companies are doing that, but I think it's certainly one to watch out for. That making sure there's an intentionality behind it, that the people are coming in, that they have the mentorship from people in their department and outside that.
You make a very good point, because many companies will say, well, what about the young people? They usually want to be in an office so they can get the mentorship. I would challenge that a little bit, because when I was a young person myself, I never wanted to be in an office. Since I graduated college and it was in DC, the traffic in DC was horrendous. For me, it made no sense to be sitting in traffic for an hour going there, sitting in a box for 8 hours and then coming back for another hour. I'm like, when am I living? When is my life?
No,
so for me, it didn't make any sense. But what did help me was that we would go to trade shows with my boss, and then I would watch him in action. And that's where I picked up so much, and I learned so much from him.
That's exactly what some of the companies, what we're hearing, what they're doing is they're basically, maybe for the first month, they're going to the office or shadowing or meeting some of the team, or else they're organizing maybe more regular offsites for the new joiners or whatnot, or what they can do. I mean, I really believe so much of a culture can be done remotely, but that face-to-face is such a powerful glue behind it. Every now and again, and it can be maybe once a quarter or maybe once a year.
Yes.
But certainly navigating that, like you said, shadowing the boss at the trade show. The same thing for me. Like that mentorship was great. But it's a mindset shift, isn't it? Not just the face-to-face, but leveraging the mentorship remotely.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we do meet with the team 4 times a year, which is official, and then many other times other teams can organize. They have certain budgets they can spend. We meet in great locations. Part of it is work, part of it is fun. And that really makes for a great bonding experience, learning from each other, and then really taking those learnings forward for the next 3 months that we don't see each other, or maybe go travel somewhere. We have a Slack channel, travel. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is really crucial, like to give the team the ability to get together. For us, is we're setting up new locations for Boundless. We have like our CFO coming here, and then like doing like the groundwork and getting to know the local team, and really like being part of creating this. Because if you're isolated in another office in another part of the world, it's really challenging for you to feel that you're part of something bigger. But also, I think a challenge that we see is we are actually a hybrid company, because we have educators and we have like hospitality employees that are locally, and then we also have our, let's say, headquarters type of employees that are all remote. So how to balance those two cultures? Because the hybrid word became the biggest word during the pandemic, when employers realized that everyone want to be everywhere in the world. So how to reconcile those two groups of employees and making sure that there is fairness is really key.
That's cool. And how do you guys do that, Mauro? Because that's a little bit difficult to do, like the hybrid situation. And
yeah, we're still learning, to be completely honest. Like, we are trying to figure out how can we create not two cultures but one culture. So one of the things we're doing, we're giving our employees the option to book one of the Boundless properties and leave like a Boundless family in one of our locations, and that can be done for like a 3-month period, but also during the holidays. So our employees can get together like in the last 2 weeks of August or in December, and then kind of build and see what we're building in like live, and that makes a really big difference. So the frontline employees feel that they're really part of it, and they're building the company together.
Amazing. And Phil, have you seen certain things in your consultancy with hybrid versus fully remote?
I've made some recommendations to some organizations when and where possible, budgets and so on. Is a lot of companies tend to align themselves in regions. Like there'll be an Asia Pac region, Middle East and Europe region. There'll be a UK or EU region or a North American region. If you can do regional cross-company meetings besides just the teams, that's also really good. And like, maybe get a CEO or a CHRO or the CFO at some of these regional meetings and gatherings. You can cross-pollinate and get some ideas beyond just a team meeting or trying to get everybody together 3 or 4 times a year. And it may be also more cost-effective with shorter flights.
That's true. As the company grows, it does get a lot more costly to bring everybody in one location. We're seeing that pain point now where, we were, 10, 20, 30, and now we're 170. And when you become 250 and 1,000, where do you go? Like what hotel or properties fit you?
Well, actually, Lona, I've got a good tool for that. I'm going to share with you guys in the chat. It's a company called Troop Travel, and they have a very interesting tool that some companies are using.
Yeah, I know a company as well that does company-wide organizational adventure travel and things like that.
What these guys do is they help you to figure out what is the most cost-effective, most sustainable place. So you might have people from like 50 different parts of the world, and they can say, right, based on everyone's input and who's got visa ability or whatnot, this is the place to meet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good, because we had some problems with visas in the last gathering we had. So certain people couldn't make it because of visas. This was in Mexico, so that could be interesting for the attendees. Awesome. Guys, please prepare your questions, because we're going to go through a couple more, but we can't wait to hear from you. So the next question is, how do we keep remote employees energized and productive? How are you helping prevent burnout? This is a big topic.
Phil or Maro, you guys want to go ahead on that one?
Yeah, I mean, what I've done and what I do is what I've recommended to others is the leadership has to reinforce that it's okay to be asynchronous at times, and that not every email needs to be answered in a 5-minute window, and make it culturally acceptable, like from the CEO down. With a line that says, just because I'm sending this to you at what is my time, doesn't mean that you have to respond immediately. Please respond when convenient in your time, and just sort of respect those boundaries and make it culturally okay to not be on every call every time for everything that's going on, and vary, let's say, an all hands meeting, vary the time zones so that certain time zones get better and get like a highlight, and it's okay then if some time zones don't make that one particular meeting.
I think Philip touched a very, very key point, and that's really for us is crucial, because when you're remote, you're actually working more because your computer is always there. There's no limit, and what we need to do is really show our employees that there is a limit. They need to have time for their families. Like Boundless is really about families. So we're building this brand for families. So we tell our employees, look, this is the time that you're supposed to be working. This is the time you're supposed to be off. This is the time you're supposed to be exercising, and so on and so forth. The other thing we're doing that is interesting is really enforcing the one-on-ones, making sure that happen on a weekly basis, that you're connecting with your team. And it's really about like personal connection, not really an update trying to figure out, where people are versus their objective. It's really like, how are you doing? Are things going with you? A chat that you normally would have in the cafeteria of a traditional office. So having that on an ongoing basis. And then the last thing that we started doing that is quite interesting and been going very well is pairing new employees with employees that have been with us for longer, like kind of a buddy program where you have someone that help you navigate the company and get to know everyone, is there to support you in a very informal way, because those relationships normally would happen in an office, but virtually is much more difficult.
Yeah, we tying into that, I think, just after just sharing a link to some recent McKinsey research, and I think they talk about some of the drivers of, let's say, attrition or retention. And I think if you talk about burnout, if you're in a job that doesn't align with your values, we've already seen with the pandemic this huge shift in values. So I'll go back to an example I often give is my little 1-year-old baby boy coming up and giving me a hug in the home office. I mean, what kind of a 5-day-a-week job is it going to take for me to go back to that? I'm sorry, I'm just not doing it. You could pay me whatever it is. That's irreplaceable. So that kind of shift in values, I think looking at that then from a company perspective, that what are the attrition and retention drivers? And we're already seeing it, for example, with Spotify. The recent Spotify data that came out with their own work from anywhere policy, they've seen an increase in diversity inclusion and a 15% reduction in attrition as a result of that. So I think keeping an eye out for these data points that come out will be very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Apple announced today that they're mandating 3 days a week in the office. What is that going to do to their attract and retain strategies? Is it going to be enough to just say I work at Apple now? Or is it going to be my values and where I want to live and how I want to work are going to become more important?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting because I know that when they had a different policy, which was a bit stricter, maybe 4 months ago, the employees kind of like wrote a letter to management saying that, you're hiring the best people, but then you tell them what to do and where to do it from. Doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think, yeah, giving people the freedom and flexibility, giving them real vacation time. This was not mentioned, but it's really important because in places like Silicon Valley, people will say you have unlimited vacation, but then when management is not taking any vacation, that sends the wrong signal to the company and therefore can lead to burnout, to a lot of the employees.
I mean, Lorna, if you get into it, the way we worked pre-pandemic was a depersonalized, non-customized way of working. And now we've got 2 freight trains where people have said, I want to customize my life the way I want to do it. And I don't want work to determine the rest of how I structure my life. I want the flexibility. And on the other hand, some companies that are saying, no, we want to customize your work, I want to customize your life around what we want. And it's like a freight train coming against, don't get me wrong, certainly with a recession coming, they'll have a bit more leeway, there's no doubt about it. But I still think the structural trend, it's like a freight train that's just going to crash.
Yeah, I'll add to John. I think there's a third train coming, which is government and government regulations, which, you're seeing countries now that have nomadic visas and flexible tax policies will be countries and areas that attract some better and longer term value talent and away from countries like the US, which has very strict requirements. We're going to lose a talent war because of our government policies.
Yeah, well, what we said in the 90s was that in the 90s, it was countries tried to attract companies for lower corporation tax. Now it's the whole dual mobility of individuals. It used to be the billionaires that would move around to optimize their taxes. Now it's all of us can do it. We can remote work.
Yeah, I would say the majority of our customers are families that used to live in major cities like San Francisco, New York, Toronto, London, and they really realize that now they can live in Lisbon, they can live in a Greek island, they can live in Tuscany for like 1/4 of the cost of living. Then they have tax incentive, they have more time with their kids, then they have maybe better food, better quality of living, and it's really hard to trade that. Once you start doing this, it's really hard to go back.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that because I've been living it that life myself, and I see it here at Sintra and at Boundless, and how you guys kind of give that time to parents. Like there's yoga, there's wine tasting, there's a panel discussion. There's so many things that are built into the experience that you don't overwork yourself. Like a lot of us tend to work for many, many hours, especially if we're cooped up at home. But if you have a community that's built around you and you have all those activities that you're doing with the community or with kids, it really helps you have a balanced life. And that's, pretty amazing. And like John
For
said,
sure.
like that is a rich life, right? Like, I mean, I determine like a rich life being able to control or have freedom over my location and time. And that's the best thing that, one can wish for.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I grew up in a city with 20 million people, and my first job, I spent 3 hours a day in traffic. And then there's no way as a parent, like I have 3 daughters, that I can do that, because then it's time that I get home at 8, 9 p.m. and not seeing my kids. And living in a smaller city, or being, working from home and being everything nearby, it's just a huge difference in how you feel. And that's really hard to change. And make people go back to the office. It doesn't matter, like to John's point, doesn't matter how much they're paying.
But
Yeah,
the
there's
really
so many.
powerful thing is there are really powerful solutions coming out there around tax, around the insurance, like SafetyWing is doing, or like what you're doing about this. Like the pace of change here means a lot of this is becoming so much more possible.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as individuals who have lived the life like Lona and you guys do this more, government regulation will eventually have to catch up. And so I think there will be a greater change in that as this becomes a more normalized lifestyle.
Yep, governments have to compete for citizens instead of the other way around. Citizens for government. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Now, a more like a controversial question, which will bring up a lot of things. I think this is great. How do you know your employees are being productive? And I know you guys have to say quite a bit on this, but I know this starts with trust. And Phil, you were talking about this a bit earlier. Maybe you can start us off.
Yeah, I think this goes to a conversation I have on a regular basis with leadership in companies that are considering going remote, going work from anywhere, or staying work from anywhere. Is how do I know my employees are working? And my answer to that is, how do you know they're not? And my question that is another one is, who cares if they're not working 9 to 5, right? You have to start with a position of trust versus trust being earned, which is the older model. And from that standpoint, is set good key objectives, set measurable tasks, and then have good one-on-ones, as Mauro was saying, where those information can be sort of recorded and captured, and sort of a good either performance management system or a good tech stack, and get to know your people, and you'll know if they're being productive. I mean, we all know that happy employees are productive employees. And if you've got an employee that's sitting in a box, miserable, renting time and space, then they're going to be a lot less productive than the employee that you trust is happy and fulfilling performance-based objectives. So it's a leadership and mindset shift from time and space to performance-based.
Yeah, I think for me as a manager, after doing this for a number of years, having 2 companies, being my third one, it's really like for you to understand as a leader of your organization that an employee could be sitting in your office for 10 hours, 12 hours. Doesn't mean they're producing something valuable. It doesn't mean they're working. They could be on Instagram. They could be playing a game. They could be doing nothing. And you're never going to know that. The only way to fix this is actually at the hiring process. Is hiring, bring on board people that are coming to work for you for the right reason, because they believe in the mission that you're building, believe in the company, they share the value, and that's the only way to fix. Because policing employees is never going to work unless you are like a factory and you count the output of each person, which is not the case for majority of people going remotely.
I think kind of summarizing all what you're all saying, I mean, it's very getting people behind the vision and having that belief and that trust and a strong culture that they understand why we're doing something. But then the what we're doing together with the employees, having clear goals and targets on what needs to get done in the output. But then the how, that's very different. How they get that done in how many hours and when and how, that's up for them to decide how they get it done. And it's a big mindset shift, because the how it was done pre-pandemic was in the office and in that office space. Whereas I think it's just that it is taking a while for a lot of managers to get away from that. You don't necessarily need to track the how if you just focus on the what and the why.
100%. I know there's a lot of questions from the audience. I'm going to ask you guys just one question, but before that, I do want to give my 3 incredible lessons from being 100% remote. I have more than 3. But just like Philip said, trusting your team. So at SafetyWing, we give trust first. And that's how it goes with every single person, focusing on results and not the time you put in, like many of you said. Giving employees accountability, so making them responsible for what they bring to the table, and making communication a priority, encouraging flexibility, and having shorter meetings. Actually, shorter meetings have been key for our company because sometimes people get inundated with so many meetings. Sometimes we try like a meeting sabbatical week where you can say no to meetings. That's really important so that you can focus on deep work, but also have time between meetings so that you're not running late every time, or like you're not exhausted. You kind of have a 10-minute buffer. We do 20-minute meeting slots, and that's what we do with all the team members. So before we move into questions from the audience, I want to hear from you guys in terms of the technologies that you recommend to keep your employees happy, productive, and thriving. Think meeting tools, productivity tools, HR tech, communication, project management. What are some things that you use in your team? And I'm happy to also give you mine. Or I can start.
I'll start from my standpoint. Having a really good data hub, like a really flexible HRIS system, one that can take into account different countries, different norms, different pronouns, different ways people like to present themselves, and one that could also act as a social media kind of connector so that you can make connections with your teams. If someone likes to play guitar in the US and someone likes to play guitar in Spain, they could find each other within your organization. Are key, and ones that facilitate and help performance management goals and communication are going to be key, whether it's Teams or Slack or Zoom. Those are individual choices, but they're all something along those lines.
We use Slack for chat communication, and Google Meet for our meetings, and then Asana for project management, and then Airtable to keep all the data and everything organized, and then obviously we're using SafetyWing for the benefits. And I think it's really technology is out there. It's really about creating a culture of using it properly and having like your employees understanding when to use what, how to book meetings with people, what are the limits and what are the time zones, how do you follow that. And that's like creating that culture of using the tools the right way is as important as having the right tools.
Yeah, on my side, I'm actually just going to share a couple of interesting tools that are out there that might be that some of the audience might find helpful from the tax and kind of remote work and global mobility space. So I'm just going to share it in the comments. There's a few different ones. Obviously, we have our own as well, but more than happy just to share a couple that the audience might find that are also out there as well. I think, for example, one of the ones that's out there is, for example, Furry Nomad is a brand new tool just to enable your teams to be able to track their residency. So obviously, it's one thing for the company to be careful and have the tools, and that's what we deal with, but also for the individuals, so they can actually track their individual tax residency to know when they're triggering residency in different countries.
Yeah, that's really important. From our side, we're using TeamFlow to have our team meetings. So we meet the strategy teams meet twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays for 2 hours. Everything happens on TeamFlow. It's really great. We also have Notion, where we keep all the documentation, anywhere from mission, vision, values, how we do things at SafetyWing, and then all the different teams have their pages. So you can see anything from their goals, what are they working on, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. There's so much information on Notion, and documentation, I believe, is a big part of building a great remote company. Just because you're not in person to show people, they can just quickly search, time off or, a careers page. Like, there's so many things that Notion helps you build. And then, of course, Slack, we use Loom quite a bit. We do this small Loom videos to show how certain processes are done, or maybe to show like a new flow of design. And it's been really helpful to kind of cut the time down of communication and not have a meeting, but use a Loom instead. Cool. So now we are at time for doing some questions. I see a lot of questions. So I'm going to solicit the help of Charles to read some of these. So yeah, please feel free to continue to ask more questions. Hopefully we'll get to all of them.
Yeah, and Lona, so just jumping in here, I'm looking at the questions, and over half of them are actually on the exact same thing. Seems like this is the #1 obstacle that people are facing, and that's getting management, senior management, to allow remote work, 100% remote work. And so maybe we could just chat here real quick about what are some of the best arguments to be made for going 100% remote. You know, is there a certain data that should be looked at on productivity? What's out there that they could look for or look at that they could present to their senior leaders?
Yeah, I know that John will give you some data,
Yeah.
and he already gave some data on Spotify. But what I want to say is that you need to have a pulse of your employees. For example, we have an internal NPS score that the head of culture reports on every month. So it's from a scale of 1 to 10. If we're around 9 point something, we're good. If it's below 9, not so good, and we see why. Now, you should ask your people, right? Like they say, when you build something that people want, you should also build a company that people want to be happy at. So definitely ask people, like, do they want to be remote? How would they prefer to work? What kind of arrangement would they like? And they will tell you. So it's not so much about management deciding, it's about your people, because they are the blood of the business. And if you have attrition, if you have people that are leaving, you need to have those exit interviews. You need to understand why they're leaving. And you can show the data to management and say, this is what's happening. We need to change things. There are tools out there that help us get remote, and here's how we can do it. John?
Yeah, no, that's very well said, Lona. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. 3 different aspects: people coming in, people that are there already, people that are going out. People coming into a company, looking at, for example, why they decided not to take up a role, for example. So it could be the case that we've seen in some cases when we're speaking to people with global mobility and HR, we say, do you track the data of why good candidates that you were going for decided not to join? Was it because of your remote work or work from anywhere policy, or a different aspect? So trying to collect that data and connecting it cross-functionally with the right departments, because that might be an interesting data piece for the global mobility team, but it might be the recruitment team that might have that piece of data. And once you're in, you couldn't have said it better. The internal NPS, I love that concept of the way you pitched that, Lona. And then when people are going out, the attrition side of it, again, looking at the attrition. I think the biggest argument is the data. If the actual CEOs, the executive team can see the data, that because we don't either have remote work or work from anywhere policy and we're losing good candidates, for me, that's the most powerful argument. You know, that's better than any emotional argument anyone will ever make. You can speak passionately about the subject, but what works even better for a lot of these executive teams is the data, the fact it's costing us.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead, Maura.
Yeah. So just if the let's say employee happiness topic won't work, the other part that would work is the financial side, like how much it costs to actually run an office that no one want to be in, right? And that huge, depending where you are operating, and it's very easy to add up all the costs of having an office. It's not only the rental, it's the furniture, the employees to support, and now as a company, you're actually passing that cost to the employee because they're paying for their own internet, their own coffee, and obviously they're getting a lot of benefit from this. So the CFO would be happy to hear that part of the conversation, and the CEO will be very happy to hear the part about employee retention and actually getting more talents.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know, Phil, you're going to say something, but OPEX is a big thing right now. So operating expenses, how can you cut them? So instead of cutting people, you can cut that office.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is it's all of it. And one of the biggest obstacles to some of this is not having the resources internally in the company to get that data in the right location, and that then speaks to the CFO. So if you're you have to make sure that you have the ability to harmonize the data, collect it, harmonize it, and then put it into CFO speak, which is different than like HR speak or other people speak. And so you've got to know how to present that data as well. So it's more than just having it; it's knowing what to do with it, and using that. The other thing I would say is, it's education, right? It's, you got to spend and invest the time in educating these leaders that this life is possible. And you know, data is great, but a lot of it comes down to, this is the way we as the leadership from 1990 when we started our careers was trained, and so it's getting them over that thought process. You know, you could show all the data you want, but if you can't get them over the mindset shift of, I need to see it, touch it, and know it's happening, then it's you know, the data is just going to be there.
You know, that's a really good point, Phil. And by the way, do you help companies kind of
I do,
make
yeah,
that
because
case, make
it's
the case
exactly,
for the CFO or the CEO?
yeah, it's taking the numbers and helping you collect the numbers and putting them into that speak, and then it's getting them over the objections, you know, their own self-limiting beliefs of what they were trained, you know, back in the 90s when you know, we all seem to be of a certain age, when we started our careers in those metal boxes, and what and how we came up, and how they, you know, we want everybody to be like us. And it's getting them over that mindset shift of that. So it's taking the 2 points, the data, which is great, and McKinsey studies and all the other studies that show how people want to live and work, and then getting them working with companies to get over the mindset shift of, this is possible. You know, this isn't going to take your company down. You know, you know, you don't have to be time and space anymore.
One thing that Rowena Hennigan said in the panel we were doing last week at Boundless is that, you know, ask management, you know, have they ever worked from a co-working space before? Have they worked from another location before? Not really, don't ask them like, you know, what do they think about that? Ask them, have you tried doing this yourself? You know, and once they have that experience, that they work from like a co-working hub, if they work from, you know, a trip they're taking to Paris or wherever they're going with a family, and they work from there, and see what they, you know, say about that. That's they could tell you something.
And the reality is, even though many management or executive have imposed the work from the office lifestyle to many people, the reality is executives traditionally have been working from anywhere. They're going to conferences, they're going to board meetings, they have, you know, their country homes, they have their beach home. So it's really a double standard, right? It works for a selected group, but it doesn't work for the rest of the corporation. But now the rest of the corporation is realizing that they should be benefiting from this as well.
100%. Yes, that's such a good point. Like being a founder myself and raising money and going to all kinds of different places. And usually my team would be in one location and I'll be just, you know, traveling and doing this life. So you're right. Yeah. It's trusting people that they can do the same as you.
Yeah, for me, I was a believer that you needed to have an amazing office in a great location with great amenities to build a culture. And we did that twice, but then now I'm more concerned about my competitors getting the talent. And I'm not getting the talent because the talent doesn't want to come to live in the city where I am, or the talent don't want to go to the office, or cost, because you're spending money in something, then you're not really having money to develop your product, to develop your brand, to create a culture of engaged employees. Really, like, there's many ways to look at this, and it's nowadays there's a lot of data points to support this.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Another line of argument that we, or reason why we to be 100% remote and borderless, is business continuity, and no one ever really talks about business continuity. But you know, if you are a borderless company with talent dispersed around the globe, you're never subject to a catastrophe in one particular region or country or area, because you're able to shift your talent and your work based on where that is. So you know, when we also talk to business leaders and we're trying to get them over this sort of mindset shift, it's, think about your business and what would happen if a terrorist attack happened, like, you know, 9/11 in New York City, where many businesses had to shut for months, or during COVID, if you had a hot spike and you couldn't get people to the office, and you had to shut down completely because people couldn't work. Well, if you had a distributed workforce with talent located all around the globe, you never really have that problem. You can always have somebody on looking after your customers, clients, and other coworkers. So from a business continuity standpoint, this also makes a lot of sense.
That's excellent.
And Lona, I can jump back in here with another question here, and this one's actually for you. What's the tool you mentioned that SafetyWing uses to keep track of data and stay on course?
Data documents, you mean? We use Notion. Notion, it's a big company, and you can customize so many things there. There's no code people that can help you with Notion pages, but it's really great because that's where you can put even your projects and keeping you on track on what's being completed and not. So we use Notion kind of like an Asana as well, where we put all of the documents, all of the data, of course, not the data that's sensitive, but that one.
Yeah, and I'll just follow that up with one other question on tech stack. What is a good free tool to use for meetings or for employee happiness measuring?
Oh yeah, free tool for meetings, I guess Google Hangouts. That's something that comes with your Gmail account. I don't know how much TeamFlow costs, but it's a pretty cool thing that we're using. I don't know the cost of that, so maybe look and see if it's cheaper for smaller teams. And then the other question was?
For happiness measuring.
Oh yeah, happiness. We use Lattice at the moment, Lattice. That is an interesting company where it helps us measure our team's happiness through a Slack kind of like ping, which is quite easy. And all you have to do is like look at your Slack, you have a ping from them, and just have to rate something from 1 to 10. Just 2 questions, and it's very simple. Everyone can do it. And by it being integrated to Slack, it makes it that much easier because you don't have to go into open an email, then click on the survey or whatever it is. It's much more faster, I'll say.
Cool. Jumping into the next one here. All right, let me see. I have 80 applicants for 3 positions. What should I look for when appointing people who can perform remote work or perform working remotely?
Well, maybe I might just jump in here very briefly, and then after Phil and Murray can go in. But the first thing that's a real bugbear, it's a real thing that frustrates a little bit, is 2 things. First of all, when companies are putting jobs out for advertisement in the first place, very often what they don't do is they don't say whether they allow work from anywhere for which countries for how many days. That's one aspect. And secondly, they don't say what the model is in different countries. Are they going to, okay, in this country you do it via legal entity, in this country you go via employer of record, in this country via a contractor, and for those number of countries. So what can be frustrating for candidates is when they go and apply to a company, and it turns out, well, actually, sorry, we don't hire from that country at all. Or, you know, well, actually, they're applying for a job as an employee in a legal entity, and it turns out, well, no, you can only go via the contractor route. Well, for some people, you know, that might be a blocker. So I think trying to re-educate people around how you set the whole HR recruitment funnel up to make that clear from the get-go, it helps reduce, you know, a lot of friction. Because, you know, you mentioned at the start, Lona, people saying it's a remote job, but actually it's not. It's only remote within this particular state. I think that can be a frustration.
I agree with that 100%. I think also it's be very clear on what values you're looking to build in your team and in your culture and in your trust metrics, and be very clear in the job description and in your recruiting process, and everybody in the recruiting process is clear on what it is you're rating on, so that you can make the best possible hire based on your culture, vision, and values.
Yeah, every time we hire, we create a scorecard by the hiring team on what we're looking for, what are the objectives for that position, what are the competencies we're looking for, what like that person going to be measured on, and really interview to understand if they're going to perform on that specific task. And I think it's real for face-to-face work as much to remote, but really to understand, like, you know, if your manager is in Bali and you only have people in California and the time zone that really doesn't work. But that's something for you to think about, like what are the consequences that you're going to have by hiring people in other parts of the world if that's going to be the case. So for us, it's like we try to have like a bit of clusters. We hire from anywhere, but at the same time, we want like people to be able to have some window that they are at the same time zone. So like 3-4 hours a day, they can kind of collaborate and get things done. And then each of them can do their own things at their own times as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that for us, it's about finding that mission-aligned person that understands our values and really believes in them. That it's also passionate and also cares. So, you know, hear their story. Like, what is their storyline? Like, you can really tell about a person if they tell you their story in a way that's memorable. A lot of people will just say jargon or certain words to like impress you, but you can't fake like someone's life, you know? So if their life really impresses you and you know this person will perform because of the things that brought them to where they are now, and maybe some adversities they've had, I think that will definitely maybe help you choose the right person.
All right, so we've
Hey,
got
we're 4 minutes.
Four more minutes here. We've got 4 more questions. We'll probably get through a couple of these. All right, so I'm going to just start with the first one. Our team struggles with time management. They're logging onto their laptops early and working late. How can we encourage them to work less?
Tone at the top. What's the executive team like?
What is
That'd
it?
be one of the questions. That'd be like one of the questions that you'd have is if the executive team are always switched on and are always coming back straight away and are living the values of coming back very quickly, that might be a tricky one to culture to change, I guess. Huh? But yeah, I'd be interested to hear that.
I encourage my team to put on their calendar all their personal time. I actually do that myself, like the time that I spend with my kids, the time for like health activity, the time for focus, and really block those windows, because when you're in different time zones, you don't know when to stop working. I have people in Vancouver, in New York, people in Portugal, in Greece. So you're working like 20 hours of the day because your employees are there. So you need to set limits yourself as a manager, and then make sure that your team is doing the same.
Yeah, I make it pretty clear that my working hours are typically between 10 and 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And if you want to catch me after or before or any other windows, you know, it's a special request, and I typically try to honor them, but there may be opportunities where I won't honor those. And that becomes a very cultural norm.
That's interesting though, Philip. I think that's very, very powerful, because in the US, there's very much an always-on mentality. You see the memes going about on Twitter with, you know, an American, you know, taking like about 2 minutes of a holidays over the summer, and then the Europeans taking 3 months. I mean, how do you handle that cross-culturally? That's interesting. Yeah, it's not easy.
I am very honest about with prospects, clients, people, or potential hires, that for me, this business is focused around it, and it supports my lifestyle, and my kids, my family. Their needs are going to take precedent over, you know, some of the things that need to get done, and I'm very open about it, and I make no bones about that. And it's a, you know, I try to accommodate things, but I will say no. And if that's going to be something that's going to stop you from working with me, then I'd rather not work with you. And that is a cultural issue. And we talk about hiring for values. You know, that's something that I want to make sure people are clear and understanding, and have a really good kind of feel that, you know, if you have to stop to get your kids from school, then that is stop and get your kids from school. You know, and so on. And you know, I make sure that is a big part of our value, vision, and mission, and we live that by who we select to work with, and you know, by that, I mean my calendars are blocked off. You know, Calendly is blocked off after a certain time for me. People just can't book meetings.
Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, guys, we're short on time. What we want to do is let the attendees know that we have a poll afterwards to rate how this panel was for you, but also let us know if you want more of these webinars. So do you want them just once monthly or 2 times a month? I would love to hear from you. If there's some topics that you want us to cover, please send them over. I'm always interested in kind of like what the attendees want to hear versus what we hear from the grapevine. Thank you so much, Mauro, Philip, and John. It's been a pleasure. Pretty awesome. Hope to see you soon. And thank you everyone for joining us in August during your holidays or whatever you're doing.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.